As the Rams head into the offseason as Super Bowl champions, there is both a worst case and a best case of what comes next.
You are Locked On Rams, your daily Los Angeles Rams podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On Rams your first listen every single day, free and available wherever you get your podcast, your daily dose of Rams talk every single day. My name is Travis Rogers. Make sure that you follow me on Twitter at my name, at Travis Rogers. Of course, you can follow at Locked On Rams. And of course, the Rams, Locked On Rams YouTube channel. Why don't you just subscribe to all of these things? And that way you got yourself covered. It's going to be in your feed every single day. I do the Rams pregame show, halftime show, postgame show. I have since the Rams came back from Los Angeles. So thanks for checking out Locked On Rams. Let's get right to it, right? The Rams are the only team that's going into next season as Super Bowl champions, right? As the defending champ. And that means that a lot of people are coming for a lot of their things, that there's going to be a best case scenario and a worst case scenario for this team as they start to prepare to defend their Super Bowl championship. It's a great place to be in, but it's a unique place, right? That you get picked, you pick late. You don't pick at all in the Rams case. You have coaches that are leaving, all of the variables that come into this. Let's go through this with the best case scenario first, and then we'll come up with the alternate of that in just a little bit. The best case scenario is the following. Number one, Robert Woods comes back and he's healthy to go. Robert Woods all of a sudden gives you that dynamic duo that you had. This is pre-OBJ, right? One of the things that the Rams were able to do long before Beckham got here, and Odell's an incredibly part of this, Odell's in both best and worst case scenarios, is that they were able to get guys open because Woods and Kupp can do so many similar things. They're very similar receivers. They can both play in all three spots in the offense. They can both block. They're both very physical guys. They can both run every route that there is to run. So getting him back and healthy is key to what they're going to look like next year. The next guy is Cooper Kupp. Can he continue to improve? Can he, and quite frankly, improving at this point may be a bridge too far. And I know that that's the anti-athlete, right? That athletes are always looking to get a little better. I remember when I was working for the Angels, I asked Mike Trout one time, how do you continue to get better when you are already the best player in the league? And he looked at me like I was an insane person because he can always get better. There's always something that you can refine and tweak and polish and all of these things. And I would imagine that Cooper Kupp looks at it the same way. The idea of, okay, I won the Triple Crown, receiving yards, touchdowns, and receptions. I was the Super Bowl MVP. I can get better. So if he can maintain where he is or get better, that's an incredibly important part of this. And that brings us to the other guy that I mentioned a minute ago, Odell Beckham Jr. It's weird to put it like this, but oddly, I think him getting injured in the Super Bowl probably helps the Rams. I think that means that it's more likely that he returns to the Los Angeles Rams than he goes out and explores what's out there. And here's why. He knows this system. He finally got familiar with this system. He won in this system. He's got a quarterback that knows how to get him the ball in Matthew Stafford. He's got a head coach in Sean McVay that knows exactly how to utilize what it is that he does. And because he's going to be rehabbing, because he's going to be going through the process of getting healthy all over again, that way he doesn't have to learn a new system when he finally does get back in there. He already knows it. He can just get healthy, come back and play football and hit the ground running. I think that'll help the Rams a great deal. In fact, if that is the way that it ends up going. So you got your three wide receivers. We'll get to the other parts of this in a second. But imagine what that receiving core would look like if all three of those guys are turned up to their maximum abilities. If you have Kupp, we had Kupp by himself and he became Super Bowl MVP for at least a half, right? You have Odell Beckham, who rediscovered his game. I would argue it never was lost. He knew it was there all along, but the league rediscovered Odell Beckham Jr. And everybody that's a Rams fan already knows how tough and how valuable player Robert Woods is. Those three guys with that quarterback together, that's best case scenario, which brings us to the next part, right? The guys up front, the five guys up front. I think you're going to see a lot of turnover on the offensive line. Now, the best case scenario can go two different ways here. Number one, you could bring Andrew Whitworth back. You could bring Joe Noteboom back. You could start to add some of these guys, and maybe you run it back more or less with the guys you have. It's a risky proposition, but you could do it. It was good enough to win the Super Bowl once. Maybe you can make the argument it'd be good enough to do it again. I think that if Andrew Whitworth decides not to play, but comes back in some capacity, I don't know if it's in a coach or a consultant role or whatever it might be, but his presence, I think, would be incredibly valuable to what they're trying to get done up front on that offensive line. Or the option number two, you go into free agency, you make a trade, you maybe find some guys down in the draft. The Rams have been pretty good at finding valuable players beyond the first couple of rounds in the draft, and you can fill in that way. The offensive line's a tough place to fill in with rookies. You can do it. We've seen some teams have some success with it before, but usually you're going to want an offensive group, a veteran offensive group up there, and that's what they have going right now. So if they can find a way to keep the majority of that together, or maybe fix it on the fly, whether it's Noteboom, whether it's Whitworth, maybe you pay cut some guys, you restructure some contracts, that is a big best case scenario that you are tight up front in that deal. Now, what about Cam Akers? Does he look like the guy we saw 2 playoff series ago against Green Bay and against Seattle, who was absolutely hammering guys, who looked like a running back that you could really do a lot of different things with? Great. If he comes back and looks like that, that's best case scenario. The other scenario we'll talk about coming up here in just a little bit, because that falls into the other category along the way. Here's a big one. Aaron Donald. Aaron Donald has been in this league just long enough now that you can start to ask yourself the question when, and this is not unlike LeBron James, right? Then the sports are obviously very different, but the question is still the same. LeBron James has been at the top of his game more or less since he came into the league. Same thing with Aaron Donald. Football, obviously, a far more physical sport than the NBA, but the questions are basically the same. At what point does the graph start to tip over to the other way? And when it does, how much does it affect everyone else around it? Why the Rams have been so good defensively, really during the entire Aaron Donald era, is because he is so good. He is such a gifted player. He demands so much attention from the other offense that you're going to get guys that are getting very favorable matchups other places on the field. Whether that's Michael Brockers or Ndamukong Suh or Leonard Floyd or Dante Fowler or any of the other players that they have brought in over the years to stand on the other side from him, that's a very, very big deal. Now, and the second that he starts to come back down a little bit, then those matchups in your favor on other places become a little bit more even, and now all of a sudden that defense is a little bit. So if Aaron Donald can still be at the very best level of his game, it helps the other 10 guys on the defense immeasurably. If they have to pay as much attention to Aaron Donald as they have over the last few years, and all of a sudden he's still there, then you cannot decide, okay, we'll put 2 on Von Miller, we'll put 2 on Leonard Floyd, or whoever it might be. You're going to have to put 2 on Aaron Donald, and those other guys are going to get big opportunities. So if AD's game can stay near the very top of where he is, much like LeBron, then everything else you can kind of worry about, because you know that the most important piece of it has been set up all along. And then the last part of the best case scenario is have a good draft. You know, the Rams are not going to pick until very late in the draft. If Von Miller decides to go, they'll get a 3rd-round pick compensatory. But the fact of the matter is they're not picking until the back half of the draft. And you're going to have to find some guys that not only make the team, but you're probably going to have to find some guys that are going to play, right? Now, the good news is kind of a bad news, good news situation here, too. The bad news is that's hard to do. The good news is they've done it before. The Rams have found very good players beyond the first couple of rounds. Cooper Kupp might be the best example of that we've seen in the league in a very long time. It's a 3rd-round pick that came in and just kind of took the league by storm, Super Bowl MVP, like we've talked about. You're not going to probably find that. But if you can find another starter, if you can find a starting corner, a starting safety, an offensive lineman, a linebacker in that 4th, 5th round, that's found money. And that is certainly a part of the best case scenario. Now, the other side is true as well, right? The worst case scenario, that's coming up next. But first, let's talk about BetOnline.net. Okay, so football season, boo, is over. But you're not just a football fan, right? You're a basketball guy, pro basketball, college basketball. So for all of your latest odds, totals, player performance props, to the fun stuff like where the next fired coach might land, BetOnline.net is your #1 spot for all your sports betting needs. BetOnline remains the best spot for all of your sports scores, podcasts, and news this entire season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline.net is your source for hockey, for boxing, UFC odds, right down to your favorite other sports and information. So head on over to the website today, or you can use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Okay, thanks for making Locked On Rams your first listen every single day. Also, make sure you're following Locked On NFL, Locked On Experts, covering the biggest stories from around the NFL every Monday through Friday in less than 30 minutes. It also is free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Again, my name is Travis Rogers. Thanks for checking out Locked On Rams. Make sure you click that subscribe button both on your podcast feed, and if you haven't, gone over to our YouTube channel and click to the Locked On Rams YouTube feed as well. And that way you're good. You don't have to do anything after that. So we talked about the best case scenario. How about the alternative of that? There are a lot of moving parts, right? There are the championship teams always are going to have players leave for different opportunities, maybe better opportunities, maybe more lucrative opportunities. You're going to have retirements. You're going to have a brain drain in your coaching staff. You're going to have a lot of different things that take place on the not so good side. So let's start right here. And I think that this is a big deal. What if Odell decides he wants to go somewhere else? I mean, I don't know if any of us thought that this was something that was going to be as important as it seemingly is. But if Odell Beckham decides to leave, you do not have necessarily that third guy, or arguably even the second guy, considering how good Odell Beckham is, to really keep Cooper Kupp freed up to a reasonable amount. Robert Woods could certainly do that. We'll get to that in a second. But if Odell decides to leave, and now Van Jefferson is a regular part of your offense, and Van is an interesting player because there are moments where it looks like he's really coming along. It appears that Sean McVay is a big fan of Van Jefferson. So I think he's going to be a part of what you're doing going forward. But think about all the different guys they've had in that third role. We've seen Sammy Watkins. We've seen Brandon Cooks. We've seen Josh Reynolds. We've seen a lot of players try to hold that down, and no one's really been able to do it for an extended period of time before they cycle it through and try the next guy. It's been Woods and Kupp for a very long time, and that third guy has rotated through. If Odell does, in fact, get an offer from somewhere else that he decides to accept, if he decides that he wants to go play somewhere that's not Los Angeles, that's a big deal because that makes those other two guys slightly less effective along the way. Not to mention, you don't have another incredible weapon like you would with Odell Beckham Jr. So I think him leaving could begin a domino effect at that part of the game that would be noticed fairly significantly. The other side of the offensive line conversation that we just had a minute or two ago, what if none of the items that we talked about break the right way? What if Andrew Whitworth decides to retire? What if Joe Noteboom, they don't re-sign him? What if some of the other guys along the line continue to maybe go the other way, continue to struggle? We're talking interior linemen, we're talking Edwards, we're talking Corbett and these sorts of guys. And they kind of uneven. Brian Allen, their center, is somebody that I'm sure that the Rams have looked at one way or the other. What if all of these things break the wrong way? And what if by the time it's your turn to pick in the draft, there isn't anybody that you think can step in right away? Let's say that you run this back, only there's no Whitworth, there's no Boom, and you got to play with some backup offensive linemen along the way that are now starting offensive linemen. That is the beginning of real problems for almost everybody. That creates problems for the quarterback, obviously, the running back, obviously. Your wide receivers are far less effective because there's not enough time for them to get open because there's an unbelievable pass rush right out of the gate. That could be right near the top of the list of things that are worst case scenario, that offensive line just doesn't come together the way that you're going to need it to. And this was a big question going into last season too, right? The question of, is the O-line good enough? And there were a lot of people, Rams fans and otherwise, they know it's not. The Rams thought that it was, and they ran it back. They basically ran back the same group of five guys that they did the season before. And there was a lot of head scratching along the way. And there were some ups and downs to be sure, but that group of guys held strong and got it together. And ultimately, we know, won a Super Bowl. Can they do it again? Can you ask them to be that fortunate 2 seasons in a row? I think it's a really good question. I don't know what the answer is, but if it breaks the wrong way, you got problems. And if that part of your game doesn't work, I think we have a pretty good idea of what a football team looks like that can't block anybody up front. You saw what Aaron Donald was able to do, and I'm not saying every other team has an Aaron Donald, but if your offensive line can turn other guys into better players than they are because they can't block anybody, you'll get a little bit of an Aaron Donald effect because your quarterback just simply does not have enough time along the way. All right, one last part of this as far as the worst case scenario potentially could go, which is what if all of the exodus in the coaching staff finally starts to catch up? I've talked about it a lot on this pod. One of Sean McVay's great assets as a coach is his ability to hire really good people, his ability to replace Wade Phillips, his ability to replace a Brandon Staley, his ability to replace Matt LaFleur, Zach Taylor, all of the other guys that have gone to other places and thrived, quite frankly. At some point, you figure you're going to miss on one of those hires. And so, nobody bats 1,000 when it comes to hiring replacement guys. You're going to have, think about your workplace. Guy leaves, another guy comes in. Okay, that works out okay. Another guy leaves, another guy comes in. Yeah, that one wasn't nearly as good. Sean McVay hasn't had too many of those. So the law of averages would tell you that maybe at some point you're going to hire a guy that's not quite up to the level of the other people that have come through. that's certainly a possibility with this Rams team, just the collective brain drain that could go along with it as well. Now, here's another one that we haven't talked about too much on the pro side, but was an incredibly valuable player for the Rams this last season, and he may or may not be back. Von Miller. If Von Miller decides to go, what are we talking about? More attention paid to Aaron Donald with less potential consequences other places on that offensive line, right? If I have Aaron Donald here and I got to put two guys on him, that means Von Miller, Leonard Floyd, or whoever else is going to get an opportunity to go. If I can put two guys on Aaron Donald and I don't have to worry about Von Miller doing something else, if it's a different player, certainly a player that's not nearly as capable as Von Miller, now what do I have? Something less than I had when I won the Super Bowl. Von Miller it got off to a slow start when they made the deal with him. It took him a little while to kind of find the groove and find out the way that he was going to play on this Rams team. But once he did, he was unbelievably useful in that Rams defense. If he decides to go somewhere else, and again, I think it probably breaks the right way for them. I think he probably does come back. It makes a lot more sense for him to come back and play with the Rams than it does to go somewhere else. But you never know. You never know how those things go. So Von Miller deciding to come back or not deciding to come back could put this in either the pro or the negative column. Okay, so we do this every Friday. We go through your YouTube comments and get some of your thoughts on this team and answer some of your questions along the way. That is coming up next. But hey, listen, we're almost to March. Are you still staying strong with your eating? Should be. If you've been using the Built Bars exactly right, you know how to do this, right? You take all of the junky stuff that you have. It's in your car. It's at your desk. It's at work. It's at home. Get rid of it and replace it with Built Bars, right? You make sure that you get all of the good stuff. All Built Bars are covered in 100% real chocolate, 100% real chocolate. You can't beat that. They're low calorie. They're high protein. So get rid of the bad stuff and replace it with all the good stuff. Here's the good stuff. 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. What does that mean? I'm not quite sure. I just know that that's the good stuff, and that's what you want. Go look at the back of that compared to the back of a candy bar, and there's no comparison. Unbelievable flavors. Coconut almond, mint brownie, white chocolate cookies, and cream. It is delicious, and it's good for you. And at Built Bar, it's all about the taste. They make it taste good first and then put all the good stuff in it for you. Here's how you get them. Built.com. Built.com. Use the promo code LOCKED15, and you're going to get 15% off your order. Use that promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. Okay, so like we like to do here on Locked On Rams, after you click subscribe on the YouTube channel, you can filter on down and put some comments there in the comment section, and maybe I will respond to some of them like we do on Fridays. For instance, Irish Oxley writes, is it just me, or did the Rams D-line become even more explosive in the second half of each playoff game? They simply couldn't be stopped. No, I don't think it's just you. I think that was a real part of why the Rams were successful the way that they were. We talk a lot about how great Matthew Stafford was, and he was. We talk a lot about how unbelievably dynamic of a player that Cooper Kupp is, how he continues to get open, and he did. But you're right, Irish Oxley. The thing that the Rams did was put relentless pressure on the other team's offense, especially up front. And, we spent a lot of time talking about Aaron Donald and Floyd and Miller and these guys. And even guys like Greg Gaines, who we've talked about on the show. Ashawn Robinson had a very good season as well. But the fact of the matter is, you can only hold off that thing for so long. Let's just look at it from a Super Bowl perspective. In the Super Bowl, the Rams had 1 sack in the first half. Remember, that was supposed to be the unbelievable mismatch. The advantage that the Rams had going into the Super Bowl, perhaps greater than any other, was their defensive front against the Cincinnati offensive front. But for a half, Cincinnati was able to manage it, right? It was able to manage it for a while. Think about what happened in the NFC Championship game. The 49ers were able to keep the Rams defensive front off of them for about a half. You can't keep it going. Eventually, it starts to break down. You might block Aaron Donald once or twice or 3 times or whatever it might be. He's going to get his eventually, and the more tired you get, the longer the game goes, the more times he has put his hands on you, the more likely it is that he's going to have a breakthrough, the more likely it is that his teammates are going to have a breakthrough. So I think you're absolutely right. That defensive front in the second half in the playoffs was relentless. As good as that game-winning drive was with Kupp and Stafford ultimately punching it in there to give them the lead, they don't do it if that defense hasn't locked them down the entire second half. They hit one big play over the top. Stafford threw an interception to give them one little short field goal along the way. Other than that, the defense gave them nothing, absolutely nothing. I think you're spot on that. This one is from Martin Miles, who says, I love McVay as a coach, but I will not hate him for going the Madden route. He will be a great broadcaster. Who knows, right? I don't know if it were as easy as, oh, he'll be the next John Madden, then we would have found the next John Madden. It doesn't work like that. Sometimes you think guys are going to be great, and they're not. And sometimes you're not quite sure what it's going to be, and they turn out to be unbelievable. Look at Tony Romo. Was anybody sure that that's how Tony Romo was going to show up on TV? I don't think so. And the next thing you know, he's making $17 million a year because he's so good at it. We've seen some other guys go in there, and it just doesn't quite translate. Now, that being said, I think he'd be a pretty good broadcaster too. I don't think that's the question, whether he would be good at it or not. I think the question is, does he want to do it? I think Sean McVay is one of those guys that would be good at just about anything he decides that he wants to go do and be good at. If he decided, you know what, I want to be good at riding a unicycle, I think he'd be juggling rolling pins and chainsaws in a few weeks on a unicycle. He's that sort of guy. The question is, does he want to juggle chainsaws and rolling pins on? I don't think he does. And I don't know if TV right now is the thing that would interest him. If he really has the John Madden thing going on right now, where I'm a young man, I've had a great deal of success in this league, and I just don't want to live this life anymore. I do not want to work 18, 19-hour days for 6 months in a row and then get my off time where I'm only working 12 hours a day. If he's really feeling that, great. Then go do TV, do your one game a week, call the Browns and the Steelers on a Thursday night and keep it moving. And if that's what he wants to do, good for him. I just don't think that it is. I don't think that he's ready. I think it will happen eventually. He's 36. This is the beginning of your career when you know what you're doing, right? To think about whatever it is that you do. When you start out, you think, oh, I got this. You don't. You don't know exactly what it is. Maybe you're better at it than the other guys that are just getting started, but it takes a little time. And maybe sometimes you make a whole bunch of mistakes. You realize, okay, that's not what it is. But by the time you get into your 30s, you realize I've got a pretty good idea on how this works. And I am actually good at this. And I do know that sometimes things go wrong. And I do know how to fix this. And I can't wait to see what's coming next. I think that's where Sean McVay is in his career. He might be one of the best coaches in the league. I think that he is. He is an incredible. This is the part that's so shocking and something that we've spent so much time talking about. His level of experience for 36 years old is unprecedented, really. Nobody's supposed to have gone to the Super Bowl twice by the time they turn 36. It doesn't make any sense. So I think he understands that with all of this additional information and additional experience, the amount of damage he could do, if they can get a little lucky and Stafford stays healthy and they do pretty well in the late rounds of the draft, I think he's probably one of those guys. Can I get to Bill Walsh? Can I get to all of these guys that have won more than one? And maybe even get out of that group of guys that have won two, because once you get out of the guys that won two, there's only four of those. There's only four guys in the history of the league that have won more than two. So I don't know if he's ready to go John Madden yet. And I don't know if there's another video game. I don't know if there's another broadcasting opportunity to take you to Madden levels. He was 101. I don't think anybody is going to be able to do that. All right, one more here. This is from Glow Waring, I think it is. Did you not see a running game performance in the Super Bowl? We need offensive line. Not drafting Creed Humphrey will haunt us for a long, long time. Okay, Gil or Glow. Gil? Glow? Okay. Regardless. This is my favorite thing about sports fans, and I love it, because the Rams just won the Super Bowl 2 weeks ago. Okay, there's still confetti in my office here. There's still confetti on the floor at SoFi Stadium from when they won the Super Bowl. And one of the takeaways is you're going to regret not drafting somebody for years to come. No, they just won the Super Bowl. This idea that you're going to win the Super Bowl every single year if you make every single right move, it doesn't exist. Okay, it doesn't exist. The Rams said, you know what, we're going for it now. We're going for it right now. We're not going to draft him. We're going to do him. We're going to spend some money over here. We're going to bring this guy in. We're going to make this trade. We're going to give him more money. We're going to make sure that our stars are taken care of. They won the Super Bowl. So we're going to regret this for years after that? I don't know, man. It's going to take a really long time before the glow of winning a Super Bowl starts to fade. Now, that doesn't mean that they don't need to address offensive line. I agree with you. Their running game was not good in the Super Bowl. Their running game has been really sporadic ever since Todd Gurley. They've had moments with Cam Akers that's been pretty good. They've also had, like you mentioned, a Super Bowl situation where they couldn't do anything on the ground. So we'll see whether or not that's something they address in the draft. I wouldn't think so. You have a couple. I think Sony Michel's probably gone, but you have Cam Akers, you have Darrell Henderson. Henderson can't stay on the field, but Cam Akers is a pretty good player. He can learn how to hold on to the ball. You can maybe make him a little bit more dynamic in the passing game. I think you have some options there. And you're right. The offensive line needs to be addressed. That's why we were talking about it as both worst case and best case scenarios, depending on how that goes. But the idea that, as they're sweeping up the confetti from winning a Super Bowl, that they regret not drafting an offensive lineman, I find that one really hard to believe. It's that's winning the whole pot at a poker table and then saying, a few hands ago I could have won a different pot. No, I just won the whole thing. Everybody else is going home. I have all the money. Now we play next time. Maybe I'll regret not doing it in a while, but I have a really hard time saying they're going to regret something for years to come when the moves that they made to get to this point resulted in a Super Bowl championship. Now, let's say they don't punch that thing in. Let's say they don't get that touchdown at the end of the game and they lose. Now we're having a slightly different conversation. But when you get to unveil a banner in SoFi, World Champions 2021 season, regret for a long time to come? I don't know, man. It seems like a little bit of a bridge too far. All right, thanks again for making Locked On Rams your first listen every single day. My name is Travis Rogers. Locked On Rams is free and available wherever you get your podcast. Now, for your second listen, make it Locked On NFL Draft. Ryan Tracy and former NFL cornerback Eric Crocker bring the NFL Draft to life every day with insight and analysis on college football prospects and NFL front offices. It also is free and available wherever you get your podcast. Enjoy your weekend. We will be back on Monday with a new Locked On Rams. Whose house? It's Locked On Rams house.